Do not bring your family to my house on Father's Day. We are tired of you. I read my son's message 3 times before I understood that those words were actually meant for me. The phone felt heavier in my hand. Outside my kitchen window, the morning sun was shining over the quiet street in our small Ohio neighborhood, and everything looked exactly the same. The flowers I planted last spring were blooming. The coffee on the counter was still warm. The table was already prepared for the family gathering I had spent weeks planning. But in less than a minute, the entire meaning of that day had changed. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 64 years old, and for most of my life, my family was the center of everything I did. I was the person who remembered birthdays, prepared holiday meals, and kept old traditions alive. After my husband Thomas passed away 3 years ago, I promised myself I would continue creating moments that reminded our family of the love he left behind. That was why Father's Day was so important to me. It was not just a holiday. It was a chance to remember the man who had spent 38 years building our family with patience and kindness. I had prepared Thomas's favorite dishes. I placed old family photographs around the living room. I even brought out the blue ceramic plates we only used for special occasions. I imagined my son David walking through the door with his wife Emily and their children. I imagined the sound of everyone talking at the same table again. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe our family was finally becoming close again. Then my phone lit up. David's name appeared on the screen. I smiled at first because I thought he was letting me know they were on their way. I was wrong. His message was short, cold, almost impossible to connect with the little boy I used to hold in my arms. Do not bring your family to my house on Father's Day. We are tired of you. I looked at the words and waited for another message to appear. I thought maybe he had made a mistake. Maybe he meant someone else. Maybe there was some explanation that would make sense. But the screen stayed silent. I walked to the dining room and looked at the extra chairs I had placed around the table. Every chair represented someone I loved. Every plate represented someone I hoped would come. I did not cry. I did not call him immediately. I simply stood there and tried to understand when my own son had started seeing me as a burden instead of his mother. I thought about the years before that message. The times I drove across town to help him when he needed support. The times I stayed quiet when I felt forgotten. The times I told myself that families changed and I needed to be patient. Maybe I had been too patient. Maybe I had spent so many years trying to keep everyone together that I forgot to ask whether anyone was still holding on with me. I picked up my phone again and looked at David's message one more time. My first instinct was to explain myself, to remind him of everything I had done, to ask what I had done wrong, but something inside me stopped. I placed the phone face down on the table. Then I looked at the photograph of Thomas sitting beside me from years ago. He always told me something I never forgot. He said, "Sarah, love should never require you to disappear." I took a deep breath and looked around the room I had prepared with so much care. I still did not know what would happen next. I did not know why my son had chosen those words on a day meant to honor fathers and family. But I knew one thing. For the first time in years, I was going to stop chasing people who had already decided to walk away. For 38 years, I believed that keeping a family together was something you did with patience, forgiveness, and love. I never imagined that one day I would be standing in my own kitchen wondering if I was the only person still trying. After I placed my phone face down on the table, I walked through the house slowly. Every room held a memory. The small marks on the hallway wall from when David was a child. The old family pictures sitting on the bookshelf. The wooden cabinet where Thomas kept his favorite coffee mugs. It was strange how a single message could make familiar things feel different. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning up the details I had prepared for a celebration that might never happen. I put the extra plates back in the cabinet. I turned off the music I had chosen for the afternoon. I moved the framed pictures of Thomas from the table and placed them carefully on the shelf. I did not do it because I was angry. I did it because I needed a moment to accept what had happened. Looking back, there had been signs for years. Small moments I ignored because I wanted to believe everything was fine. After Thomas passed away, I noticed David became more distant. At first, I understood. Losing a parent changes people. Everyone grieves differently. I never wanted to pressure him. I told myself that giving him space was an act of love. But slowly, space became distance. Distance became silence. And silence became something I could no longer ignore. David used to call me every Sunday evening. He used to ask for my advice about work, family, and life. When he and Emily were preparing for their wedding, I was the person he called when he needed help making decisions. I remember spending countless evenings helping them organize everything. I remember folding invitations at my kitchen table and smiling because I thought I was watching my son build his future. After they had children, my role changed. I became the grandmother who brought homemade cookies, attended school events, and kept small gifts ready for birthdays. I never expected anything in return. That was never why I did those things. I did them because I loved them. But somewhere along the way, I started noticing that my efforts were becoming invisible. Invitations became less frequent. Phone calls became shorter. Family conversations happened without me. Whenever I felt hurt, I found a reason to excuse it. I told myself they were busy. I told myself they had their own lives. I told myself not to take everything personally. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I spent so much time understanding everyone else that I forgot I deserved to be understood too. Around noon, my daughter called. Her name was Lisa, and she was the one person in the family who always noticed when something was wrong. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked after. I answered. I looked at the table where the Father's Day decorations were still sitting. For a moment, I wanted to pretend everything was normal. That was what I had always done. But this time, I could not. "Your brother sent me a message this morning," I said quietly. There was a pause. "What did he say?" I did not want to repeat the words. Saying them out loud somehow made them feel more real. "He does not want me at the gathering." Lisa was silent for a few seconds. Then she said, "Mom, I am so sorry." I looked around the empty room. Those words were simple, but they meant something. Someone finally understood that I was hurt. That afternoon, I sat in my living room holding Thomas's old photograph. I remembered something he used to say whenever our family faced difficult times. People sometimes forget the hands that help them get where they are. I never thought those words would apply to me. I never thought I would be the person feeling forgotten. But as I looked at that photograph, I realized something important. Love was not proven by how much I could endure. It was also measured by whether others valued what I gave. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped trying to convince my family that I belonged. That evening, after I spoke with Lisa, I stayed in the living room longer than I expected. The house was quiet, but my mind was filled with memories. I looked around at the place where I had spent so many years building a life with Thomas. Every corner carried a story. The small wooden table where we drank coffee every morning. The chair near the window where he read the newspaper. The shelf filled with family photographs from birthdays, vacations, and ordinary days that somehow became the moments I treasured most. I realized something that night. I was not just grieving the message David sent. I was grieving the feeling that I had slowly disappeared from my own family. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. For the first time in years, I decided to write down my thoughts instead of pushing them away. I wrote about the moments I remembered. The times I felt included. The times I felt forgotten. I did not write to blame anyone. I wrote because I needed to be honest with myself. As I turned the pages, I noticed a pattern I had never allowed myself to see. I had spent so much time making excuses for everyone else that I stopped noticing how often I was the one adjusting. When David needed help, I was available. When he was busy, I understood. When plans changed, I accepted it. When conversations became shorter, I told myself not to worry. I had always believed being a good mother meant asking for nothing. But maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe being loved was not supposed to feel like constantly proving you deserved a place in someone's life. Around lunchtime, I received another message. This time, it was from David. I looked at the screen before opening it. Part of me hoped it was an apology. Part of me hoped he had realized how painful his words were. The message said, "Mom, I think it is better if we just keep things simple for a while." I read it slowly. Keep things simple. Such a small phrase. But I understood what it meant. It was another way of creating distance without having to admit there was a problem. I placed the phone down and looked at the family photo on the counter. In the picture, David was young. He was standing beside Thomas, holding a baseball glove, smiling like the world was full of possibilities. I remembered that boy. I remembered teaching him how to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. I remembered staying up late when he had school projects. I remembered every ordinary moment that built the relationship between a mother and her son. That was the hardest part. David was not a stranger. He was my child. Later that afternoon, Lisa came over with 2 cups of coffee. She sat beside me and looked around the room. "Mom, you do not always have to be the one who fixes everything," she said. I smiled sadly. I think I forgot how to stop. She reached for my hand. "You spent your whole life making sure everyone else felt loved. Maybe now it is time to ask if they are making you feel loved too." Her words stayed with me. That evening, I walked to the closet where I kept Thomas's old belongings. I was not looking for anything specific. I just wanted to feel close to a part of my life that had always felt safe. Behind some old boxes, I found a small wooden container I had not opened in years. Inside were handwritten notes, family receipts, and a few letters Thomas had saved. I sat on the floor and carefully opened the first letter. His handwriting immediately brought back memories of his calm voice. The first line caught my attention. "Sarah, if you ever feel like you are carrying this family alone, remember that love should be shared, not silently carried." I read that sentence again. Then I looked at the date. It was written only a few months before he passed away. I wondered why he had written those words. I wondered if he had noticed something I had refused to see. As I held the letter in my hands, I felt something change inside me. The pain was still there. The disappointment was still there. But beneath it was something stronger. A quiet decision. I was done begging to be included. I was ready to understand why I had been pushed away. And maybe for the first time, I was ready to let the truth speak for itself. The letter from Thomas stayed on my kitchen table for the rest of the evening. I could have placed it back inside the wooden box, closed the lid, and tried to move on like I had done so many times before. But something about those words felt different. It was as if my husband had left behind a reminder for a moment he knew might come. A moment when I would need to stop carrying everything by myself. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to find out what had changed between my son and me. Not by arguing. Not by demanding answers. I wanted to understand. I wanted to see the truth clearly. I started by looking through old family records, photographs, and messages I had saved over the years. I did not expect to find anything dramatic. I simply wanted to understand when the distance began. As I looked through the memories, I noticed something I had never paid attention to before. The changes were not sudden. They happened slowly. A missed phone call here. A canceled dinner there. A family event I heard about afterward instead of being invited. Small moments that I had explained away because I loved my son. I found an old message from David from 5 years earlier. It was a simple text asking if I could help him and Emily prepare their new home before they moved in. I remembered spending an entire weekend helping them organize boxes, decorate rooms, and create a place they could call their own. I remembered feeling happy because I felt needed. But as I continued scrolling through my old messages, I noticed something else. The conversations had changed. Over time, they became shorter, less personal, more like updates instead of conversations. It was as if I had slowly moved from being part of their lives to simply hearing about their lives. That realization hurt more than I expected, not because I wanted constant attention. I never did. I only wanted to feel like I still belonged. Later that afternoon, I called Emily. I hesitated before pressing the button. She was my daughter-in-law, and I did not want to create more tension. But I believed she might know something David had not told me. When she answered, her voice sounded surprised. "Sarah, is everything okay?" she asked. I looked out the window at the backyard where Thomas and I used to spend summer evenings. "I wanted to ask you something," I said. "Have I done something that upset David?" There was a pause. A long one. "Why would you ask that?" Emily replied carefully. I took a breath. Because I received a message from him that made me feel like he does not want me around anymore. Another silence followed. This one felt heavier. "Sarah," she finally said, "I think there are things you do not know." I sat down at the kitchen table. "What things?" Emily did not answer immediately. I could hear her choosing her words. "David has been stressed lately. He has been dealing with a lot. But I do not think this is only about you." Her answer surprised me. For the first time, someone was not telling me that I was the problem. Someone was admitting there was more to the story. "Emily, what is going on?" I asked. She lowered her voice slightly. "There is something David never told you." I looked at Thomas's letter beside me. The same feeling returned. The feeling that there was a part of my family's story hidden from me. "What did he never tell me?" I asked. Emily took a deep breath. "I think you need to hear it from David himself. But Sarah, before you talk to him, you should know one thing." "What?" I asked. Her answer was quiet. "You are not the only person he has been pulling away from." I sat there for a moment, letting those words settle. Suddenly, the message from David felt different. Maybe it was not just about one holiday. Maybe it was part of something bigger. Something that had been happening quietly while I was busy trying to keep everyone connected. I looked again at the old letter from Thomas. Love should be shared, not silently carried. For the first time, I wondered if my husband had known exactly what I would need to remember. After my conversation with Emily, I stayed at the kitchen table for a long time. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were louder than ever. For years, I believed I understood my family. I believed I knew where I stood with each person. I believed that if I continued showing love, patience, and understanding, everything would eventually return to the way it used to be. But now I was beginning to see that maybe I had been holding on to a version of my family that no longer existed. I looked at the empty chair across from me and thought about Thomas. He always had a way of noticing things before anyone else. He would see when someone was uncomfortable. He would notice when a conversation felt incomplete. Looking back, I wondered if he had noticed the distance between David and me before I did. That evening, I decided I needed to talk to my son. Not through messages. Not through assumptions. I wanted to hear his words directly. I called him and asked if we could meet the next day. There was a pause before he answered. "Sure, Mom," he said. His voice sounded cautious. "We can talk." The next afternoon, I met David at a small coffee shop near his office. It was a place we had visited years earlier when he was starting his first job. Back then, he would sit across from me and ask for advice about everything. He would tell me about his dreams, his worries, and the things he wanted to accomplish. Seeing him across the table that day felt strange. He was still my son, but there was a distance between us that I could no longer ignore. "Mom, I know you are upset," he said. I looked at him calmly. "I am not here to argue, David. I just want to understand." He looked down at his coffee cup. "I think things have become complicated." I waited. "Complicated how?" I asked. He sighed. "I feel like there has always been pressure around family gatherings, around expectations, around everyone trying to keep old traditions alive." His words surprised me. "You mean my traditions?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. "Sometimes it feels like you want things to stay exactly the way they were when Dad was alive." I thought about that for a moment. Maybe there was some truth in what he said. Maybe I had been trying to hold on to memories because they represented a time when our family felt closer. But I also knew something else. Missing the past was not the same as refusing to accept change. "David," I said quietly, "I never expected you to live in the past. I only wanted to feel like I still had a place in your present." He looked away. That silence told me more than his words did. "Mom, you do not understand everything that has been happening," he finally said. "Then help me understand," I replied. "I am your mother. I should not have to guess why you are pushing me away." For a moment he looked like he wanted to say something. Then he stopped himself. That was when I realized there was still something he was not telling me. "David," I asked, "what is the real reason you sent that message?" He looked down at the table. "Because I was frustrated." "Frustrated with what?" I asked. He did not answer immediately. Finally, he said, "I felt like every family event became a reminder of how things used to be, and I did not know how to deal with that." I listened carefully. I did not interrupt. I wanted to understand his feelings, but I also needed him to understand mine. "David, I have spent years making sure everyone else felt heard. I think I forgot that I deserved the same." He looked at me differently then. Not with anger. Not with frustration. More like he was seeing something he had ignored for a long time. Before we left, he said something that stayed with me. "Mom, there are things I need to tell you. I just do not know how to explain them yet." I nodded slowly. "When you are ready, I will listen." As I walked back to my car, I felt something unexpected. I still did not have all the answers. But for the first time, the door between us was not completely closed. And sometimes, the first step toward the truth is simply knowing there is a door waiting to be opened. After I left the coffee shop, I did not drive home immediately. I sat in my car for a few minutes and watched people walking along the sidewalk outside. Everyone seemed to be moving forward with their day, unaware that a simple conversation had changed the way I saw my own family. For years, I thought the hardest part of being a mother was making sacrifices. I thought love meant giving without expecting anything in return. But sitting there alone, I realized something I had never admitted before. Love also required honesty. And sometimes honesty meant accepting that something had changed. When I arrived home, I opened the wooden box where I kept Thomas's letters. I read through them again, not because I was searching for an answer, but because I wanted to understand the person he was when he wrote them. Thomas always believed that families were built through small choices. The way people spoke to each other, the way they showed appreciation, the way they made room for each other. He never believed that family connections stayed strong automatically. They had to be cared for. That evening, I received a call from Lisa. "Mom, I talked to David," she said. I sat down at the kitchen table. "What did he say?" There was a pause. "He said he is overwhelmed. He feels like everything changed after Dad passed away." I looked at Thomas's photograph on the shelf. That part one understood. Losing him changed all of us. But I also knew grief could not become a reason to push away the people who were still there. Lisa, I said, did he tell you why he really sent that message?
She
Hesitated. He said he was tired of feeling like he could never make everyone happy. I closed my eyes for a moment. Suddenly, I wondered if David had been carrying his own struggles silently. Maybe I had only been looking at my pain and forgotten that he might have his own. But understanding someone did not mean ignoring how their actions affected you. Both things could be true at the same time. I could love my son and still admit that his words hurt me. Over the next few days, I started noticing small details I had overlooked. I saw how often David avoided difficult conversations. I saw how he changed the subject whenever emotions became uncomfortable. I realized he was not only avoiding me, he was avoiding anything that forced him to face complicated feelings. Then one afternoon, Emily called again. Her voice sounded different this time. Sarah, I think you deserve to know something. I sat quietly and listened. She told me that David had been struggling with the responsibility of keeping traditions alive after Thomas passed away. He felt pressure because everyone looked to him as the person who should hold the family together. He never said that to me, I replied. I know, Emily said softly, because he does not know how to admit when something feels difficult. Her words made me think about the message again. Don't bring your family. We are tired of you. Those words still hurt. But now I wondered if they came from anger or from someone who did not know how to express what he was really feeling. That night, I opened the final drawer of Thomas's old desk. Inside, I found a small notebook with handwritten pages. It was not a diary. It was a collection of thoughts he had written over the years. One sentence immediately caught my attention. The strongest families are not the ones without problems. They are the ones willing to face the truth together. I closed the notebook and held it against my chest. For the first time since David's message arrived, I did not feel like I was standing outside my family. I felt like I was standing at the beginning of a conversation that needed to happen. I knew there were still unanswered questions. I knew there were still things David had not told me. But I also knew something important. I was no longer waiting for someone else to decide whether I belonged. I belonged because I had always been part of this family. And now it was time for everyone else to remember that too. The days after my conversation with Emily felt different. Nothing outside of my house had changed. The same neighbors walked their dogs in the morning. The same cars passed by my window. The same flowers bloomed in the garden Thomas and I had planted years ago. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer looking at my family through the eyes of someone afraid of being left behind. I was looking at them as a person who finally understood that every relationship needed honesty. A few days later, David called me. His voice was quieter than usual. Mom, can we talk again? He asked. I agreed. This time, he came to my house. When he walked through the front door, he looked around the living room and paused near the photographs of our family. I noticed his expression change when he saw the pictures of him as a child with Thomas. I have not been here in a while, he said. I smiled slightly. No, you have not. We sat at the kitchen table where I had prepared countless meals for him when he was growing up. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. It was strange. We had shared so many years together, but now we were two people trying to understand each other again. Mom, he finally said, I owe you an explanation. I looked at him and waited. The message I sent was unfair. I did not interrupt him. I was frustrated, but I chose the wrong way to express it. Hearing those words mattered. Not because I needed an apology to feel better, but because I needed to know he understood the impact of his actions. David, what hurt me was not just the message, I said. It was feeling like I had become someone you wanted to avoid. He looked down. I know. For the first time in a long time, I saw my son not as the person who hurt me, but as someone who was also struggling. After Dad passed away, I felt like everything changed, he said. Everyone looked at me differently. I felt like I had to become the person who kept everything together. I listened carefully. Why did you never tell me that? I asked. He gave a small, sad smile. Because I thought you were already carrying enough. His answer surprised me. David, I never needed you to protect me from your feelings. I needed you to trust me with them. He nodded slowly. That moment was important because it was the first honest conversation we had shared in years. Not a conversation where one person defended themselves and the other tried to prove their pain. A real conversation. As we talked, David admitted that he had been overwhelmed by family expectations. He felt pressure during holidays because he was trying to create moments that reminded everyone of Thomas. He thought avoiding those traditions would make things easier. But he never realized that those traditions were not about the past. They were about keeping the people who were still here connected. I thought you were trying to hold on to something that was gone, he said. But maybe you were just trying to keep us together. I looked at him and nodded. That is all I ever wanted. Later that evening, David looked at the old photographs again. I miss Dad, he said quietly. I understood then that beneath the frustration was grief. We had both been carrying different versions of the same loss. I had been trying to preserve memories. He had been trying to escape the pain of changing circumstances. Neither of us had known how to say that. Before he left, David stopped at the door. Mom, I want you to come on Father's Day. Not because we feel obligated, because you are family. I smiled, but I also knew something important. The goal was not to return to the way things were before. We could not go backward. The goal was to build something better, something based on understanding instead of assumptions. After he left, I returned to the kitchen table and looked at Thomas's photograph. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Not because everything was magically fixed. Not because one conversation erased years of distance. But because two people finally chose to listen. And sometimes that is where healing begins. The week before Father's Day arrived with a feeling I had not expected. For the first time in a long time, I was not preparing for a family gathering because I was afraid of losing something. I was preparing because I wanted to celebrate the people who were still part of my life. There was a difference between those two feelings. One came from fear. The other came from peace. After my conversation with David, we did not suddenly become the perfect family. We did not erase years of distance with one afternoon at the kitchen table. But we had something we had not had in a long time. We had honesty. And honesty gave us a place to begin again. A few days later, Lisa stopped by my house to help me prepare for Father's Day. She brought groceries and a small bouquet of flowers for the table. As we worked together in the kitchen, she smiled and said, Mom, I cannot believe you are actually letting David help with the dinner this year. I laughed softly. Why would I not? She looked at me. Because after everything that happened, I thought you might need more time. I understood why she said that. The old Sarah would have spent days wondering whether she was allowed to be hurt. She would have worried about making everyone else comfortable before thinking about herself. But I had learned something important. Forgiveness did not mean pretending nothing happened. It meant choosing not to let pain control the future. That afternoon, David called and asked if he could come over early. When he arrived, he brought a box from his house. I found something, he said. Inside were old photographs of Thomas. Some I had never seen before. There were pictures from family vacations, birthdays, and simple weekends that I had completely forgotten about. David sat at the table and looked through them quietly. I think I forgot how much Dad loved these moments, he said. I looked at the photograph in his hand. He did. He loved ordinary days more than anything. David nodded. I think I spent so much time thinking about what we lost that I forgot what we still have. That sentence stayed with me. because I realized I had done something similar. I had been so focused on the pain of being pushed away that I almost forgot the people who were still reaching for me. Later that evening, Emily and the children arrived. The house slowly filled with voices again. The sound of laughter came from the living room. The kitchen smelled like the meals I used to prepare when Thomas was still with us. For a moment, I stood quietly and watched everyone together. It was not exactly like the past. It was something new, something more honest. During dinner, David stood up and looked around the table. "I want to say something," he said. Everyone became quiet. "I owe Mom an apology. Not just for the message I sent, but for all the times I made her feel like she had to earn her place in this family." I looked down for a moment because I did not expect those words. David continued, "Mom has always been there. I just got so focused on my own problems that I stopped noticing." I reached across the table and held his hand. "I never needed you to be perfect," I said. "I only needed you to remember I was here." The room became quiet, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence where people were actually listening. That night, after everyone left, I walked through the house slowly. The same house that had felt empty a few weeks earlier now felt different. Not because everything had changed, because I had changed. I no longer measured my worth by how often someone invited me in. I no longer believed I had to keep giving until there was nothing left of me. Thomas was right. Love should be shared. It should not be silently carried by one person alone. As I turned off the kitchen light, I looked at the table where our family had gathered. The empty chairs no longer felt like reminders of who was missing. They felt like space for new memories waiting to be made. Months passed after that Father's Day, and I started to notice something I never expected. The greatest change in my family did not come from a single apology or one emotional conversation. It came from the small moments that followed, the phone calls that slowly returned, the dinners that became more frequent, the simple questions that showed someone was thinking about me. For years, I believed repairing a family meant bringing everything back exactly the way it used to be. But I learned that sometimes a family cannot move forward by returning to the past. Sometimes it has to build something new, something stronger, something more honest. David started calling me every Sunday evening again. At first, our conversations felt careful. We were both learning how to speak openly after years of avoiding difficult topics. But slowly, the distance between us began to disappear. He started asking about my garden. He asked about the books I was reading. He even asked me for advice again, not because he needed me to solve his problems, but because he genuinely wanted my perspective. That small change meant more than he realized. It showed me that I was no longer just someone from his past. I was still part of his present. One afternoon, David and I sat together in my backyard drinking coffee. The same place where Thomas and I used to spend summer evenings. The trees had grown taller over the years, and the garden looked different, but the feeling was familiar. "Mom," David said quietly, "I think I understand something now." I looked at him. "What is that?" He looked around the yard before answering. "I thought you were trying to keep everything from changing, but you were not. You were trying to make sure we did not forget what mattered." I smiled because those words were exactly what I had hoped he would understand. Families change, David. People grow. Life moves forward. But remembering the people who loved us does not stop us from moving forward. He nodded. I wish I had understood that sooner. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. We both learned something. That was the truth. I had learned that love did not mean accepting every hurt silently. David had learned that independence did not mean pushing away the people who cared about him. We both had to change. A year after that difficult Father's Day, our family gathered again. This time, nobody was trying to recreate the past. We were simply together. There were new stories, new memories, new traditions. The table looked different because life always changes. Some people were no longer with us. Some things could never return exactly as they were. But there was laughter again. There was conversation again. There was love again. Before dinner, David walked over to me and handed me a small envelope. I looked at him curiously. "What is this?" I asked. He smiled. "Something I should have given you a long time ago." Inside was a handwritten letter. It was not long. It was simple. David thanked me for every moment I had shown up for him. He apologized for the times he made me feel forgotten. And he wrote something I will never forget. "Mom, I spent so much time looking for what I thought I lost that I forgot to appreciate what I still had." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my purse. That night, after everyone left, I stood in the kitchen for a moment. The same kitchen where I once stood feeling unwanted. The same place where I wondered if I still had a place in my own family. But everything felt different now. Not because my family became perfect. No family is perfect. It felt different because I finally understood my own worth. I did not need an invitation to prove I belonged. I did not need someone else's approval to know I mattered. I was a mother. I was a grandmother. I was a person with a lifetime of love, memories, and stories that were valuable. And maybe the greatest lesson Thomas left behind was not about holding a family together. Maybe it was about remembering that love should never require you to lose yourself. Sometimes people forget your value. Sometimes they need time to see what was in front of them all along. But you should never forget it yourself.